Hello all, my name is Jesper. I will shortly leave the mic to my colleague Jesper, but just to give a brief introduction about myself. I've been with GP Strategies for a little more than 2 years now. I have a certification in SuccessFactors PMGM module, working on the LMS module. And as of this spring, I got an implementation partner certification for Qualtrics. Yeah, that was briefly about me.
Okay, that means it's my turn. My name is also Jesper. That kind of makes it easier here. I've been with GP Strategies for roughly 8 years, even though the slide says 7, but it's getting very close to 8 years now. Besides being the talent team lead, I'm also the implementation lead for our Qualtrics projects. And I'll be the one taking you through the paces here today. This is the agenda. So we're going to look at various things in terms of linking SuccessFactors to Qualtrics, how to export data from SuccessFactors, how to then import it into Qualtrics, a little bit of about tiles on the SuccessFactors homepage and the link you can have in the menu, how those look and work. And then we're going to talk about some default features that are available in SuccessFactors now, launching surveys from performance forms. And this does say in signature steps that's actually an error because it works in all steps. Then a little bit about how it works in recruiting applications. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can also use other related SuccessFactors features and distribute surveys automatically. And then to go into complete tech nerd mode at the very end, we're going to have a look at how you can use the API, and I'll show you a couple of creation examples. And like Mike already said, feel free to use the chat to ask questions during this presentation. Jesper will do his best to answer them while we're going along in the chat, and then we will review everything at the end, and there will be time for more questions at the end also, should you wish to do that. So there is a couple of slides here, but all those slides are basically videos. And instead what we're going to do is I'm going to show you everything from within the project here. And the first thing we're going to talk about is how to export the data from SuccessFactors. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but in this case here, what we're going to show you is how to do it. I was about to say the default way, so the standard way that has been set up is specifically for Qualtrics in this case. To do that, we're going into business scenarios, and sometimes that can take a little bit of time to load. Hopefully it's not too long today. Looks like something's happening. And it's very slow today. Here we go. So page just needs to reload completely. So what I'm going to show you is the export to SFTP. So we're going to look into that one and to edit it and just to go through. So initially you have some options to, of course, give it a name and a description. And in this case here, we're using comma-separated files. We don't have any other type of file delimiters we want to use in this case. We use a simple header and we don't use any footers. So very kind of basic comma-separated files. Then we need to choose the fields. And in this case here, I've gone for a fairly simple solution. We're going to export user ID, username, email, first name, last name, and hire date. Compared to SuccessFactors, Qualtrics is very, very easy on what you actually need. You need the username, you need an email, you need a first name and last name. That is all the fields that are default in the system. So theoretically, we could live without the hire date and the user ID in this case here, but we're exporting them, just to have a little bit extra stuff to look at in this case here. Everything else you want to add, you can add as many fields as you want, date fields, etc., like you can see for the hire date. But all of those fields from a SuccessFactors point of view is considered metadata. So in that case, you can that's why you can add as many as you want of those. And within Qualtrics, of course, you can then on each additional user add even more fields or tags or metadata that is not necessarily available within SuccessFactors. But if you're using SuccessFactors as your main data storage, then of course it makes sense to control as much of it as possible in there. In this case here, you can see there's already a little bit of data showing up here. And the reason for that is that I've kind of already set up a little bit of filter and sorting. And very basic stuff. I've just set up first name, Ray, Sydney, and Jada, and it's taken from my sales demo. So if you're familiar with the sales demos, then you might also know these names already. There's only one of each. And the reason I'm doing this is just to have a simple file, so we don't need to wait too long for all the data to be exported, etc. Instead of just these basic filters, and I should say also with the filters here, user ID, username, etc., you can see these are the same that we export. So you're only able to set up filters on fields that you also export. That's kind of a limitation here, but theoretically that shouldn't really harm you in any way. You can set up different time-based filters also if that's needed. You can set up sorting. In this case, we're just sorting the file based on a specific user ID or on user IDs in general. When you export these files here, you need to define where you want to put the data. And in this case here, we simply chosen to use the SuccessFactors SFTP server. If you're an existing SuccessFactors customer, then it's easy to use because you're paying for it already or you have it available already. And you can use your existing SFTP accounts to export the data and then use the same accounts in Qualtrics to import the data. It is possible to use authentication keys. It's possible to use encryptions, etc., but we're not going to use that in this case. Should you have a internal FTP server that you would like to use, then that's also doable within this setup. We're giving the file a name. We could add some date suffix if we needed it. We could add some file extensions, and in this case here, we are going to put it in the outgoing folder. Once all this stuff has been set up, we can choose when we want to run this job. Once an hour, only once, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. And of course, we could, like, if you choose daily, you can choose start times, ending times, etc., how often you want to do it. If it's weekly, you can choose which days in the week, etc. But in this case here, we don't want to run it at a scheduled timing. We simply just want to control and run it manually. So when I'm on the review and run page, you can see like a little graphic about like what we've gone through, what we've set up. You can see the details below. You can see the data fields here being selected. And what we're then going to do is I'm going to click run now. That's going to trigger the job. And normally this job runs fairly fast. So just to see that it's actually producing what we would expect it to, I'm going to log in to the SFTP server. I'm going to have a look in the outgoing, and there you go. The file is already created. It's only a very small file, so that's why it's loading so fast. So now we've exported the data. So how do we get it into Qualtrics? So this is Qualtrics for those of you who haven't seen it yet. It's seen from an what they call a brand admin perspective. So that's kind of a super admin within Qualtrics. So with this account I'm logged in as, I got access to more or less everything within the entire system. And that means I can also access the admin functionalities that we're needing for this case here. What I'm going to show you first is when we go to directories, employee directory in this case here contains the users. You can see there's 111 people, and if I search for Jada, for example, nothing shows up. If I search for Ray, also nothing shows up. So instead of showing you like a magic trick that they're not there and then they will appear automatically, what I'll do is I'll go back to the directories and the employee directory again, the top level here, and then at the top, there's something called automations. Within automations, I've set up this automation job already. We can go through and edit it. And as you'll see, it's a little bit like step-by-step wizard guide kind of thing as you saw in SuccessFactors, but obviously graphically it looks a little bit different. So it's saying, well, how frequently do you want this automation to run? When should it start? When should it end? Where are the data coming from? Or where would you like to import it from, SFTP in this case? And the same details we're going through as the ones we added within SuccessFactors just a moment ago. Is it encrypted? No, it's stored in the outgoing. What's the name of the file? And as you can also see on the right here, it's basically taking me through step by step. Then the next step here is, how do you want to import the files? And what you do in this case is, the first time you'd set it up, you would normally take the file that you exported to the FTP server, you upload it as an example, and then you start mapping your data. In this case here, you can see the unique ID is the person unique ID field, and we have the email. We also have the use ID, which is additional compared to what we needed initially. And then we have first name, last name, and hire date. And even though first name and last name are listed as metadata fields in this case here, they are actually considered default. Once we continue, we can choose who should receive an email every time this job runs. If you want to spam somebody with emails, then this is an excellent way of doing it. If you want to use it yourself, you can set it up and you don't have to receive it every single time it runs. If there's nothing to do, you can select this option and then you would not receive an email. But in this case, we don't want to do that. So once we're done, we can see all the settings and we can choose view run history. You can see it's been, we've run this a couple of times before. If I click on the latest completed one here, you can see that I actually also got access to the file. So it's storing the files for me every time it's producing one. And then what we can do from in here is that we can actually run it manually. So now you'll say that it's manually scheduled, and you'll see that in a couple of moments that will change to in progress, and then it will be completed. And once we're doing that, or once that has happened, what we'll see in that case is that the users will appear within Qualtrics in the user directory. So you can see it's running, and normally, and again, because it's only 3 users, it is completing fairly fast, hopefully. So let's see, even though it hasn't updated yet, what I'll do is I'll actually, in this case, go back to the people in the directory. And you can see it says 114 people now. So we can search and we can find Ray, for example, and Ray shows up in here. And if we click on him, we get more details about him. We see the user ID and we see the hire dates as actual metadata, and everything else up here is default. So that's how you kind of get the data imported on a basic level. I'll come back to show you how we do that a little bit more advanced in the end. But in this case here, I'll go back to the first the home page. And as you can see here, I've created a little section with different Qualtrics tiles. This is just a couple of ways to show you how you can do this. If you've seen already, there might or there is a new homepage coming for SuccessFactors, and that new homepage will have a dedicated Qualtrics tile, but it's only one tile. And in this case here, what we're doing is we're creating our own. So instead of having like default text and graphics, we're simply using our own stuff here. Different ways you can use this is you can direct people directly into a survey. So you can see when I click, it takes me straight into an example survey. A different way of using it is with the manager dashboard. So if you have managers, once you've collected data for a given survey, and that survey is set up so that you can use, or you can let managers see data for their teams, then you can give them this tile. They will have the direct link, and that takes them into Qualtrics. They won't be able, as you can see in the top here, they won't be able to see all the different features I got available, like projects, actions, etc. But what they can see is the dashboard or dashboards that you have shared with them. That might be just one of many. And in here, also, this is not like going to be too much about dashboards, but just to show you, you could add, for example, filters. And what you'll see in this case here, once I choose just one filter, most of the tiles goes empty. And if I choose a couple of more of them, then you can see it starts collecting data for some of them. The rest of it is basically because this dashboard is set up to have an anonymity of at least 5 users. So if the filters I choose gives me less than 5 people for feedback, then it simply won't show any data. So that's one of the ways why you can actually create anonymity without limiting the data that people have access to. The last way of using this one here is, again, creating one for my, I call it my projects. This is for either super admins or brand admins like myself, or people who you give access to create and maintain certain projects. And the link actually works the same way as the one you would have available in your homepage, your menu. In here, it's called Employee Experience Admin. And if I click on that one, that will just create a pop-up instead of opening in a new tab. But the end result is basically the same. You end up in the same place here. So that was a little bit about how you can link data or how you can actually get access from SuccessFactors into Qualtrics. What we're going to do next is have a look at how can this stuff be automated in different ways. One of them that was available a little earlier was the option to launch at a signature step. And that was why my initial slide with the agenda was wrong. I forgot to update that part. What I'm going to do here is I'm launching a performance form, and I'm just launching it for myself. So let's create and open it. And what you'll see is happening that once I complete the first step of aligning priorities and I send it to the next step, ongoing feedback, the system will actually let me know or let me show you how I can access a Qualtrics survey. So once I complete this one here, it will take me back to the inbox, and then you'll see in a couple of seconds a box pops up. This box here is possible to change, like graphic size, whatever, any way you want to do it. The text for the link, the colors behind the link, if this one should be a button or a red little thing or something. And once you click on it, it will open up a survey in Qualtrics. So how's this stuff done? Well, if we go back to Qualtrics, I need to go to the projects here, and let's just have a look. I think it's the demo ones. Yes. So there's two different projects that I need in this case here. One is the intercept, and the other one is the actual survey. So let's take the intercept first. And the intercept is the one that SuccessFactors basically grabs and like creates the little box here. So if I click on this one, you can see I have the options to change this, to make it different, to make the box here different, like basically setting it up with graphics, etc., in any way you want and any size you want. And these little boxes are called creatives. What you then also do is you need to create an intercept, and the intercept is the one that kind of catches the event at SuccessFactors. So if we have a look at this one here, so yeah, that will load in a moment. So here, what you do is you connect two things. You say when this creative is launching, and when somebody clicks on the survey link, then you should launch this particular survey here. So you could have multiple options for these creatives, how you want to show them. Hold on a sec. I think I've been talking too much this week. My voice is slowly going away, I can feel. So you have various options. In this case here, what we've chosen is we've chosen pop over so that it shows up. But you can have like any kind of various things here. You can redirect to a different homepage, etc. So you've got loads and loads of want to control these parts here. But basically, this part here is taking your it's catching the link from SuccessFactors, and then it's redirecting you to the Qualtrics survey that you're setting it up for. So you could have multiples of these different ones here. And what you'll also see if I go back to projects and to the demo part here, is I got something for candidate surveys. And just to show you the candidate survey really quickly, the creative shows is a little bit different, just so you can see that there are differences between them. There's more text, etc. And the intercept also links to a different kind of survey. So they're linking to two different ones. So this is linking to a candidate experience survey. What you can do with these intercepts also is, well, first of all, you can track the different times they've been triggered. So it's that's one way of you to find out, well, is this actually working? Do we have, when are people hitting this? If you're doing for the, in this case, for the candidate experience or for the an application from recruiting, then you can see, well, when are people hitting these? When are people applying for something, and when are they actually responding to the surveys? Of course, the data is also stored in surveys if they actually go in and take the survey. So that's kind of two ways of looking at it. And finally, in these here is, and that's where it's getting a little technical, is once you create and set up these, now it's not loading for some reason. Why is it not loading? Let's just try again. No. Okay, for some reason that doesn't want to load. Let me just see if I can show you in the other one, because it's kind of an important part of this whole thing here. No, it's just not showing what I wanted to show. Okay, I'm sorry about that one, but that's the part where that actually gives you some data that you need to set it up in SuccessFactors. So that's, I'm sorry, but I'll have to show you only the SuccessFactors part in that case here. So what we're going to do is, in SuccessFactors, we're going to go to Qualtrics, or not to Qualtrics, but to manage Qualtrics integrations. And in here, there's two different types of integrations we can set up. One is called email surveys, and I'm sorry for the poor choice in colors. The ones we're going to look at first is in-app surveys, and that's the one. One of them is the one I just showed you, the performance review form. And in this case here, what you do is you can set up, you can give it a name, you choose talent, you choose that it's for a performance review form page, then you choose your template, and then from that template you choose whatever steps you want the survey to launch from. So you can do that per step. Theoretically, you could have one survey per step. That's absolutely possible. So if you want to ask different questions during different times of the process, then that's possible this way here. And the other part I wasn't able to show you in the Qualtrics creative setup is this intercept ID, where that is coming from. And the intercept ID, as you can see, is looking like, something that's random. It is also generated random, but there's a specific place where you kind of need to drill that out of a lot of data. Then there's a intercept URL, which is also quite a long one. And again, it has a lot of stuff. Some of it is the same as this one here, but there's a lot of things here. And these parts need to be set up. All of it needs to be set up in the right way. Otherwise, things obviously won't work. But just to show you also from a recruiting perspective, what it looks like, how that part works. If I'm in careers and if I'm searching for a job, then in here, for example, I would like to apply to be a programmer. So I select that one. First thing that happens is it's taking me to my candidate profile. Once I filled out everything there, I go to the next step. And in the next step, it actually shows me the stuff about the actual job. And in here, just say, yes, I'm both a citizen and I have an approved visa. Otherwise, it won't allow me to, to apply. And then once I apply, it takes me back to this box here. And again, just like before, you can see that the creative shows up with the link to the survey. And again, you have a different type of survey this time here where you have multiple questions about your recruiting experience. So those two parts here are, that's kind of the default one. If we go back to Qualtrics integrations here, there is a new version or a something that's brand new for the this new release that's only in preview currently. And unfortunately, I have not been able to make that work yet. It is a little difficult to find all the information that you need for this one here. But the idea is that you have either you choose onboarding, and that's done here. And then you can say, okay, are we looking for an external user eligible for hire? If that event happens, then we would be able to actually also set up a project, and we would be able to set up a some authentication. And then the idea is this user that we are onboarding would automatically be, of course, created, first of all, in SuccessFactors. They would have a user ID, first name, last name, and an email. And all of that stuff would be forwarded to Qualtrics to a specific survey that we define. That's with the project ID down here. And then the process would be that Qualtrics would actually send out a survey to this person. So once they get started, they'll find a survey in the inbox, and they'll be able to take a survey in regards to how their onboarding process has worked for them. But it's also possible to choose Employee Central, and in here we have more options. A change in manager, so you can ask for feedback from an employee. How was your previous manager? Like, did you get whatever, blah, 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 so that you eventually collect data about the different manager types. You could do it as an employment termination event. That would mean that you could launch an exit survey, which is also quite nice. And then you have adding a global assignment or ending a global assignment or adding a new concurrent employment. And finally, or not finally, this should maybe be in a different order. You have the employee hire. So once you have an employee hire event within SuccessFactors, then you would also be able to shoot off this event and have a survey sent to the user. But unfortunately, this part is, like I said, not ready yet. So what can we do instead? Well, there's a different way of doing it at this point here. And to do that, what I'll do is I'll go back to almost the very beginning where we were initially. At least I'll use the same functionality, and I'll fire off the same FTP file that we did initially with the free Ray and Jay and Jada and Sydney. And the reason for that is I'm going to use that same file. So here it is. I'm going to use that same file to show you how we can import users into a specific survey. So while this one here is running, I'm going to go back to Qualtrics. I'm going to go to directories, and in this case, not to employee directories, but to contacts directories. So contact directories are linked to the surveys, where the employee directory is more for your main users in the system. So in here, as you can see, I have two different automations, and they look, at least part of it looks a lot like the automations I showed you earlier. The way or the parts here in here is, however, slightly different. One is a contact import, and the contact import will import into what we call a list. I'll show you that in a moment. And the other part here is a survey distribution. So when we import people into a specific list, we can automatically launch a survey to them. So if we go and we have a look at the list here, there's a lot of different ones. The one we're looking at in this case here is the SuccessFactors project. You can see there's 0 people in here. And at the same time, you can see the Qualtrics webinar today. There's 38. We're not 38 in the meeting, but there's 38 people signing up for it. So when you went in to sign up for the survey, you actually automatically added to the list here. So what we can do is we can do it both ways. We can add people to a list and then they get to a survey, or we can have them sign up to a survey and then be added to a list. So that makes the system quite flexible in the ways we can work with it. But what's important for now is that we have 0 contacts in the SuccessFactors project list. We'll go back to the automations. And in here, we have 2 things. We have the contact import and we have the survey distribution. And if we look at the contact import first, you can see that it's kind of the same things as we saw with the other import. And the vast majority of it is the same. It's importing the same type of fields. It's set up in the same way with regards to the SuccessFactors SFTP server. And the differences here in this case is the link distribution and the mailing list. So we have a mailing list, so we choose the SuccessFactors project list. And we then say, well, once you're done, you should launch, use this other distribution, launch SuccessFactors survey. So if we go back to that one, launch SuccessFactors survey, it's in here. We can then edit this automation here. And again, this shows backwards that it's linked to import users from SuccessFactors. It has a schedule, so it's triggered by this automation. And then there's some information here about, first of all, which survey should we launch, the SuccessFactors test survey. The link will expire after 24 hours. So if they don't use it within 24 hours, then it's not working anymore. And of course, that can be changed if needed. And then we have composing this invitation. We can just have a quick look at that one. So when should it be sent out? How should it be distributed via emails, or can even be distributed via SMS? Who should it come from? In this case, we're just using no reply at GVstrategies or qemailserver.com. What should the from name be? So you could specify a specific name, and you can specify the reply to email so that you ensure that it goes back to a specific user who might need to be in control of this stuff. Then for the subject line, we could use something from a library, but in this case here, I just typed in a random subject. And then we've chosen a message. And again, there's multiple ones. You can define your own, and then you choose from a library what kind of message you would like in this case here. So once you've set these part up here, you can choose would you also want to send a reminder. So one thing is that you send the email out to them, and then after a certain amount of time, you could send out a reminder should that be needed. We don't want that in this case here. And then, like with the other imports, you can send, you can set a recipient email for somebody who should be notified whenever this job here runs. And again, you can make sure that it only sends an email if there's actually something happening in here. Once we have all of this, we could then run it. We'll do it from out here. Instead of running the import users to SuccessFactors, to launch the survey, we're going to run the import in here. And while I've been talking, hopefully the FTP job has completed. So again, I'll go into the run history, and from in here, I'll start the manual run. And again, this one will take a little longer to run because it actually needs to trigger 2 different automations this time. The first one is running more or less immediately. That's the part that actually runs and adds people to not the directory that we saw before, but to this SuccessFactors project list. And once that has run, it will trigger the second one, which is the automation that is actually launching the surveys. And for these 3 people here that I've added, unfortunately, I don't have my email listed on any of them, so I won't be able to the invite. But again, the invite you can define in any given way you want with graphics, etc. That makes most sense to you. And it will, of course, have a link into the survey that you're looking at. So let's see if we go back to the lists, see if it's already added. It is. So in here in the SuccessFactors project, if we open up that one, you see that Sydney, Jada, and Ray has now been added. So there's a difference between adding them to this list and adding them to the, if we go back to directories here, to the employee directory and to the context list. So the context list is kind of subsets and can be used in coordination with the different projects that you're having. So besides all of this here, what I will show you here is this is a system or a program called Postman. Postman can be used to create API calls or to test API calls. And what I just want to show you here real quick is a few examples of how that can be used. What we will do first is here I will create a project, and before I create that project, I will actually I'll have to go in here because I can't remember if I did clean that one up from last time. So if I go back to Qualtrics and I go to the projects. So in here I have in the full list of projects, I shouldn't have one called anything with demo created via API. No, there's nothing. Good. So I can go back to this one here. And what I'll do is I'll first run one call to Qualtrics and get what they call an authentication bearer. So basically, it allows me, it basically logs me on to the API with Qualtrics. Then I'm going to run a session that tells you who am I, or actually I can do it one by one. So first I'll get the authentication bearer. It gives me an access token that will last for a little while. Then I can say, with that authentication, I can use the who am I API, and I get information back about my user. I can then use the same one to say, okay, great. Now I would like to create a survey. That's very simple. Creating a survey is a little bit more complicated than that. But initially, what I'll do is I'll create that survey. So it says, that's okay, I created the survey. So if we just have a quick look within Qualtrics, so I'll just go out and go back to projects to get the list refreshed. You can see there's a project. There's 0 questions currently in the project, so there's nothing much to look at. But if I go back to Postman and then what I need to do is I first need to get questions. So I get a list of the questions within the project that I just created, and it's getting me 0 things back. And then I say, okay, great. Then once you've done that, I would like to add a question. And to do so, I need to put in a little bit more text than with the other ones. So I send that text along. And again, the system says 200, okay. That means everything worked. So if I go back here and I just, again, refresh the page by just jumping to directories and back to projects, it'll show me there's 1 question now. And if I open up in here, you'll see demo created via API. That was the one I created. And then I created a question with a few different options in here. So that's one way of using the API. What we can also do is a separate kind of event here. And again, I'll send the authentication bearer first to make sure I got that one. And then I can create a user. So currently, if I go to Qualtrics and if I search for an API user, so I'll go, this case, I'll go to admin and I'll go to users. Admin and users are showing you more or less the same thing as you have in the employee directory. So if I in here search for an API user, You can see there are no users currently with that name. And then in here, I can click send. System will say, great, that was actually done. It returns the ID of that specific user. And if I go back and I search for API again, you'll see the API user that I just created will actually show up with the details I added for that user. And that's how, or at least a couple of examples of how you can use API. SuccessFactors has an API and Qualtrics has an API. So with that one, you can set something up and you could be able to, or you should be able to connect them. There should be something coming on the roadmap that should automate this kind of setup so that you don't necessarily have to code your way out of it yourself and create the automation yourself. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that feature yet. It's just listed for second half, so it can still come. We were expecting it to come with the last release that we have, that we just have seen being added to preview. But yeah, we haven't seen any information or any documentation for any of this yet. So, and that was kind of it. So that means it's time for questions. Jesper, were there any questions in the chat?
Well, there's one from Justin asking, can you push survey tasks to be an element of to-do tiles? And yeah, I wanted to save it for now because with the new release, there is an option to create a separate tile, not in the to-do tiles as such, but a separate tile for surveys. But it requires that you enable the new homepage.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's not working that way. I don't think it's integrated that much yet.
So it won't disappear once you take the survey.
No,
but it will have a link to the survey, right?
It can have a link to the survey, but the thing is, it's not necessarily, it's still not linked to a specific project. So if you add that tile, then that tile will be visible for the people you define it to be visible for within SuccessFactors. So there's no automated link yet, so that when there's a survey ready for you, let's say in the 360 module or in any of the other type of surveys within Qualtrics, then a tile can be visible in SuccessFactors side. That's not how it's working yet. So it's still quite simple the way the integration is working. It would be nice, and I would hope for something similar like that. But currently the tiles are like only respecting SuccessFactors role-based permissions, and they're not linked in that sense into to Qualtrics. In that case, you would need something like setting up an API that would add, once they add a user to a Qualtrics survey, then that user would also be added to a role-based permission groups within Qualtrics that gives you access to see a specific tile. But again, then that's not out of the box standard functionality, and it would be something that would be a little bit difficult to create. And I won't like say 100%, I'm sure it can be done, but I would say there's a 90% chance for it at least. Anything else? No other questions? Was that the only one, Jesper?
Sorry, I was muted. We just got a new question. Can you ask Qualtrics to select a random sample to participate in a survey?
Yes, that is actually possible. So in that case, I'm not sure if you can do it when then you wouldn't be able to automate this here, because when you automate something, people will like drop in one by one or in multiple bunches. But when you actually, let me show you. We need a project. And let's just take the SuccessFactors test one. In here, when you have these projects set up, you can add participants to them. And the way you can add participants, you can do that in multiple different ways. If we import from global directory, so the employee directory, then you can say, great, like either I would like everybody from global directory, so that adds absolutely everybody, or I could say I want participants who match the following criteria with a hire date before this or after this or within a specific division or department. And then it says, what percentage of participants do you wish to sample? So here you can kind of choose, should it take all of those that you define, or should it take just some of them? So in that case, it's kind of randomizing it. Hopefully that makes sense. And what's that? That was what you're asking for, Niklas.
Yes, that's correct.
Good.
By the way, did you explain global directory?
No, well, global directory in the sense of exporting data from SuccessFactors and into Qualtrics, or what do you mean? Global.
You showed how you could explain data, extract data via FTP and so on, but
yeah,
what makes it global directory compared to just a bunch of people in a contact list?
So yeah, and that part is a little bit. Yeah, let me see if I can explain that one. So you got a couple of different things. You actually got 3 different types of directories. Let's start with the highest level, so to speak, which is users that can be visible from within the admin page. In here, you can create users that don't exist in SuccessFactors. You would use that, for example, for admin accounts or technical accounts, etc. When you then go into directories and when you look at the employee directory, that would be comparable to global directory, and that would contain your employee population. So users that are in here does not necessarily have to be under admin users. So there could be more people in admin users, but the majority of those you import here would normally also be visible in here. And then under admin users, you'd have a few more, which would be the like admin type special users, right? And then on top of that, so this is kind of your global directory. And if you then go to directory and contacts directory, in here you can have multiple lists. So that is basically contact lists, different contact lists, and you define what you want to use these for. Should they, like I said, these here are created whenever you create or whenever you guys sign up for the event that we send out a link for. Then depending on if you selected that you wanted to participate in the event on the 26th or the 29th, what would happen is that you'd be added to these lists here. So that's for us to kind of keep track of it. But what's also happening is once you complete the survey, we actually send out, depending on if we know your email or not, then we send out a notification to you. If we know your email, then we would send out a notification that has the web link, or not the web link, the what do you call it, ICS file for the meeting. If we don't know you, then we would send out a like, thank you for signing up, we'll get back to you email. And at that same time, we will send an email to Marit, who is also part of this meeting here, to let her know somebody signed up. We don't know them, so we don't necessarily know if we want to allow you into the meeting or not, as this is meant for potential customers of GB Strategies. So there's a lot of actions you can do when you run these, and the lists in here is something you can create manually to say, oh, I want to send out various invitations for these people. And if they're not part of your normal setup, your normal user list, then you could add them in here, and then you can use that as an email distribution. Did that explain the global directory?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Anything else from anybody? We still got a few minutes. No? At least we'll take that as a no. This has been recorded, so I know we are going to make this available. We're also going to send out a little survey that we hope you'll take in regards to feedback on the usefulness of the event and how we presented, etc. So it will be very, very nice if you guys would take 2-3 minutes to respond to that one once it comes out. And if I'm not mistaken, that will contain the link to the recording of this survey. So that's the way you kind of get hold of it. Good. Last chance for any questions. Otherwise, I think we will close for today. Okay.
Silence, that must mean that everyone's happy.
Exactly.
Yes. So I guess it's all that's left to say thank you so much for your time today, and we hope you got a lot out of it. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening or morning. If you have any questions whatsoever, just contact me and I can hopefully help you. Take care, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.